All right, guys, it is now 8 o'clock. We will be getting started here pretty shortly. We're just going to wait for some more people to jump on the call, or on the webinar, sorry, and we'll get started. All right, thanks, guys. All right, guys. You guys, you guys can all hear me and stuff now? Perfect. All right. So we'll just give another minute here. Looks like we got a good amount of guys on right now. Yeah, so we'll talk for a few minutes here before we get started. Yeah, so we're getting down to the last few lessons, this being lesson number 10. So only two more. I'll actually be teaching the next one as well. So I know normally it goes, Chris, then me, then Chris, and me, but this time because of the scheduling. I'll be doing the next one, which will be on this Tuesday, just after Christmas. Live streaming that webinar then, which is on the power of pursuit, in which I'm going to go over kind of more the long-term plans for you guys. Chris is going to go over a lot of the long-term stuff in the final lesson with the wrap-up and whatnot, but for the my next one after this one is going to be kind of the same theme. Ways in which you guys, going forward can really grow and maximize the growth that you had through this webinar. So I'm excited for that one as well. Not to take away from tonight's lesson, which is equally, if not more so important, which of course is on flirting and sexuality. So pretty exciting stuff for tonight. So, but yeah, so far so good. I've been having a lot of fun with this whole course, this webinar, the Charisma Decoded course, and I hope you guys have been getting a lot out of it. Again, love reading the stuff on the Facebook group. Yongxi asked a question. Hey Cajun, quick question: how long will these modules be available online? It's a good question. It's not going to be forever. I think 3 months is what we were talking about. And we'll certainly and probably stick with that if that's what we said. But we're definitely they're gonna be up for long enough that you guys, even after the course is finished, the modules, you'll still have time to go in there and watch them and all that. So lots of time to make sure you see all the lessons. We know, judging by the numbers of people watching and stuff, we know that a lot of people, maybe because of their schedules and whatnot, are having to watch them afterwards. And for all we know, there could be several of you guys that are multiple modules behind. So we figured that's what would happen. So we're going to make them available a good amount of time afterwards as well. So just to answer that. So it is now 8:07. Why don't we get started with the presentation? So I'll switch over here and we'll get started with the content. All right. Flirting and sexuality. So this one is a topic that I love teaching, and the reason why is because I'll tell you right now, there's different styles that different instructors have, and everyone's really good, as far as love systems goes. Everyone's amazing, but we all have very different styles. Different instructors are better at different things. We're all good, but we all have different strengths. And flirting and sexuality is one thing that I, and other instructors have told me as well, is one thing that I really, really focus on, and it's something that I guess I excel at. So I'm excited to teach this one because it's something that I find it can be risky, and we're going to get into this, but the rewards that you get from having, I guess, the balls to being able to really communicate your sexuality and your desire, as I believe Chris probably spoke about in the last module. There's massive benefits to that, and you start doing that, and if you can get out of that fear of like, I'm scared to tell a girl that I like her, or that to communicate that I'm interested in her, man, the reactions that you see will completely change you, and make it so that you never question that stuff again. And that's why I really like it. So I just wanted to mention that before we get into this. Some people say like, oh, I'm not the kind of guy that is really, hands all over a girl, or that goes, says really sexual things. But to be honest, I think that's kind of bullshit, because I never was either. I was always sort of a timid guy, relied on my sense of humor, tried to go under the radar, until I started practicing this stuff and playing around with it. And even, not so long ago, as a couple of years ago, I started meeting some of the other instructors that really focused on that, the more sexual aspect of it, Venture being one, my good friend. And he opened my eyes up, too, to a lot of things you can get away with. And, he's a pretty good-looking guy. Not that I'm super ugly or anything, but I was like, Venture, you're a tall, good-looking, athletic guy. That's got to be part of it, even though, I know that doesn't matter so much, but I know that's, at least for doing the really aggressive things or the really risky things, could matter somewhat. And he's like, nah, try it. And I did, and it worked great. And from that point on, I started going crazy with the more sexual stuff. So anyway, my point being that if you think you're one of those guys that's a bit more timid, that it's not really your style, just try it out. and you'll be surprised at the reactions you get. All right, so let's jump into this. Flirting and Sexuality. Very pixelated picture here on the right. Sorry about that, but this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. He says, "What you do speaks so loud that I cannot hear what you say." Now, the reason I wanted to put this quote up, I know it probably sounds a bit more like a body language quote, but the reason why I wanted to put it up is because a lot of guys think that flirting and sexuality and escalation, physical escalation, they think there's a strong part of that is verbal, and there certainly is a verbal part, but to be honest, you can really only escalate physically. And it's not to say that you can't escalate verbally. I mean, you can, but it doesn't mean anything unless there's also a physical component, which I'll get into here a bit later. But that's sort of the reason why I put this quote up. What you do speaks so loud that I cannot hear what you say. Because you can be having a normal conversation on the surface, but if you're making the movements of someone who is escalating and getting more sexual, then that is what is happening, regardless of what you're saying. So keep that in mind. Layered communication. So I have a nice picture here of Sophia Loren, probably one of the hottest women to ever lived. She's actually still quite good looking for her age anyway. I think she's like 80 or something now, maybe older. But not really much reason for putting that picture up other than the fact that she's really hot. I'm going to talk about layered communication here. Now, this is something that I think I'm the only person that teaches this. I've never seen or heard anyone else ever talk about this. What it really comes down to, I know I talked about subtext in my last module, and then this is kind of a piece of it. In fact, I usually teach it when I talk about subtext, but I wanted to save it for this one because it really is how you flirt in a verbal way. And I'll get into that in a bit more here in a second. But just understand that layered communication, it's how women communicate. And so what I mean by that is, I'll get into it in like one of the next slides here. I'm going to break all down the layers of communication, what they are. But essentially what it is that women, don't really communicate the same way men do. A big portion of their communication is done non-verbally. And anyone that's ever dated a girl, or maybe even talked to a girl, probably has realized that. And, the best example is if you've ever seen or, heard two women that are good friends talk to each other, you realize that there's a lot more going on besides what they're saying. So, they might have a communication that says, oh, hey, Deborah, how was your date with Tony last night? And Deborah says, oh, it was okay. And although she's saying it's okay, obviously it's the implication there is that it wasn't so great. But to a woman, her best friend, it might not only have been communicated that it wasn't so great, but there might have been a specific communication there that was something like he didn't pay for the meal, or he was weird when he tried to make a move on her or something. There's more subtle aspects of that a lot of men just don't pick up on. And to be honest, it's not our fault. We're just not, that's not something that we encounter a lot when in communication, especially with guys who usually just don't use those communication channels at all, but women as well. So they know what you're feeling. I think I talked about this when I was talking about maybe the last module, but essentially, women can not know what you're thinking, but they know what you're feeling. So when you speak, whatever emotion that you have when you speak is what you're communicating to them. So if you're going up and you're saying something to them, you're scared, you're thinking in your head, oh, I hope she likes me, or I hope I don't mess this up. You're actually communicating insecurity, and that's what she'll pick up on. And it's like plain as day to women. They'll pick up on that like it's as if you had said it explicitly. So again, I know I talked about this with the Art of Movement last module when I talked about subtext, but this relates to layered communication as well, so it's worth repeating. They've evolved to be good at it. I'm not sure if I talked about this yet, but essentially, most of our existence as humans has been in 50-person tribes, like 99.9% in the spectrum of human existence. Well, most of that has been in, or I guess you guys are watching the site, so most of that has been in 50-person tribes and small tribes, and so that's how we evolved. Humans, men and women, we evolved with, that sort of using that as sort of a standard. So what happens in those tribes? Why are men the way that we are, and why are women the way that they are? Well, in those tribes, and it's still like this in parts of the world that still have that sort of structure with their society. The men go out and they hunt and they get the food, and the women stay back and tend to the needs of the camp or the community with the child rearing and preparing meals maybe, and keeping up to date of what's going on in the tribe. And there's two very different skill sets that get evolved from those two things, right? So the men, we go out hunting. Well, you don't talk when you're out hunting because that's going to scare the animals away. So that's why as men, when we do things with the other guys, we do things together. We don't just talk. We go and do things. Women, they stayed back in the tribe. They needed to talk to each other to find out who is with who, who's going to backstab the other person. And because of that, they evolved to be very good at reading emotions, something that men never really needed that to evolve. So this is kind of why they're evolved to be able to. They've evolved to be able to read into that, and it's become very important. Almost their survival depends on that. So that's why they're so good at it. And why we're kind of lacking in that regard. So let's talk about the layers. Okay, so that layer 3 shouldn't be up there right now, but that's okay. Just ignore that for now. Layer 1 is literal. So this is the first layer. It's just the literal meaning of the words. It's favored by men, and it's great for instructions, directions, or orders. Okay, so that's why they put the picture of an instruction manual. So it's the literal meaning of the words. And as men, we tend to communicate more often than not with this sort of style. Like I mentioned in here, great for instructions, directions, orders. I mean, that's, to be honest, a lot of the stuff that men, that's how we tend to communicate. We give the facts, right? There's no deeper meaning to it. So that's the first layer. And also, just so you know, if you guys ever met someone with Asperger's, Asperger's being on the autism spectrum, if you have Asperger's, you're actually, for the most part, only able to communicate on the first layer. People with serious Asperger's, they don't get any other layer besides the first layer. They only understand the literal meaning. And anyone that's ever met someone with Asperger's, it gets pretty obvious when you talk to them. You can say something sarcastic to them, and they just don't get it. They take it for the literal meaning. So if you say something like "nice shirt," they're going to be like, "Thank you very much," not understanding that you were being sarcastic. Now they make up for that, I suppose, with a lot more logical intelligence, which is why you often see them in roles with as doctors and more roles that require that additional logical intelligence. But they're not so great with the emotional intelligence. So anyway, so that's layer 1. Guys, we have no problem with the first layer. All right. Layer number 2 is sort of the obvious emotional implication. So that would be things like sarcasm, if you're being sarcastic, aggression, if you're trying to say something to be aggressive, facetiousness. So if you're saying something, you're lying in sort of an obvious way where it's obvious that you're lying, as a way, usually for humor, or for joking, or for just being a shithead or whatever. Men still have no problem with this one. This is something that we usually do it for joking, and all the obvious reasons you'd use it. The other thing that we do that's actually a mistake in the second layer is men often flirt in the second layer, which it's not so much a mistake, although it kind of is, in that flirting should be done either in the first layer or the third layer. And I'm going to get into those. But the second layer is sort of the obvious emotional meaning. So you wouldn't really use it in the second layer. And this tends to be how guys tend to do it. It's sort of like they obviously imply they're flirting. And depending on how they say it too, it might come in a number of different ways. but oftentimes it's sort of seen as weak to do it this way, because you're trying to. It's almost like you're trying to take the benefit of both. You want to state it blatantly, like the first layer, but without the implication that may be what you were actually saying, and you want to give the subtle meaning from the third layer, which I'll get into in a second, without the subtlety. So it's sort of the worst of both worlds. So that's the second layer. All right, third layer. Now, this is the one that guys have problems with. As men, we don't really use the third layer that much. And the third layer is the hidden meaning, the hidden emotional meaning. Now, women, they see the third layer as plain as we see the second layer. It's really, really obvious to them. But there's certain rules they have to follow with the third layer. For instance, if someone was doing the second layer, so like sarcasm and aggression or facetiousness, you can call them on that. And it's socially acceptable to call them on that because it was obvious. But with the third layer, you can't really call someone on that, because if you call them on it, you can still call them on it, but they can always deny it. And they kind of have a base for denying it that anyone else around that wasn't paying too much attention, i.e. men, wouldn't necessarily see it and might even back the person saying that they didn't do it. It's basically you can get away with hiding it. And so the examples of this would be subtle flirting. So this would be sort of like, mostly I see with your eyes and the suggestive ways of saying things. But again, if it's too suggestive, then it goes into layer 2. So it still has to have that very subtle aspect to it. Being passive aggressive would be a third layer, but not obviously passive aggressive. I know there's a bit of a spectrum with passive aggressiveness. Manipulation, if you're manipulating someone, you're using the third layer. That picture I use is from a movie called, I think it's called Gaslighting, or at least the term gaslighting comes from this movie. I think it was The Gaslight or Gaslighting or something. Gaslighting, if you don't know, it's almost like beyond the third layer. It's like if there's a spectrum for the third layer, it's at the very far end of the spectrum. Essentially, it's challenging someone's beliefs of an event. It's actually it's kind of like manipulation. It's you make someone doubt their own memory of events by basically saying that something that happened didn't happen, with such conviction that the person that was also there would maybe doubt their own memory of it. And it's used in relationships, bad relationships, as ways to basically manipulate your partner into, when they think you did something that you did, but make them believe that you didn't do it. Anyway, I know I'm using a lot of bad examples of the third layer. There's a lot of good examples too, like white lies would be examples of the third layer. Again, subtle flirting is example of that as well. I'll give you guys some more examples of this just so you guys can understand how this works, because I know it's difficult for men to pick up on this one. So there was my wife, I'm actually married if you guys didn't know. My wife was, so back when we got engaged, I'll just switch to so you guys can see me for the story. Back when me and my wife got engaged, her friend, about 2 months before we got engaged, her friend got engaged. And they're a pretty close female friend group. And they all got together, so this girl, we'll call her, for some reason I can only think of a real name, Lisa, we'll say. So Lisa got all the girls together. She had a big, I needed to make a big announcement. All the girls got together, and she said, I got engaged. Jeff proposed to me, and all the girls were like, "Oh my God, that's so great, Lisa! It's amazing!" And yeah, it was, everyone, they all celebrated. Blah blah blah. Now, 2 months later, I propose to my girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time, and it was all planned. It wasn't like I was, I did it because her friend did it or whatever. So my wife, Katie, tells her friends, hey guys, I don't think she made like a big hoopla about it. She essentially told them while they were already all out doing something. And she said, hey guys, by the way, Derek proposed to me. We're getting married in whatever, it was like 6 months later or something. And everyone's really excited. Everyone's like, oh my God, Katie, that's amazing. And Lisa was excited too, in the sense that she said, she was like, Katie, I'm so happy for you. That's great. But there was something there when she said that Katie picked up on, that everyone else picked up on, but they couldn't say anything about. And it was essentially Lisa. Shit, said her name. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Lisa was upset that Katie was kind of stealing her thunder. That it was only 2 months previous that she got engaged and she hadn't gotten married yet. And now it seemed like Katie was coming in and trying to steal her thunder, being the first one in her friend group to get engaged. Now Katie's coming along and taking that away, and she didn't feel very happy about that. But she never said that. She just kind of communicated that by the way in which she congratulated Katie. And Katie picked up on it. Like I said, all the friends did as well, but no one could say anything. And eventually, Katie talked to her afterwards, the next day or something, and they worked it all out. But that's an example of the third layer, in which you can say something, and it can be communicated, and people can pick up on it, but no one says anything about it. It's almost 100% emotional. It's not really a verbal, there's no verbal component to it necessarily. So just understand that all women communicate like this. And if you've ever been in a relationship with a girl, you've probably experienced this. It can be the smoking gun behind a lot of problems in relationships. As men, even actually the other day, I had this actually again with my wife. We were, she had said, we were sitting on the couch, whatever, and she had said something like, I have to do these dishes. Oh, I'm so annoyed. I have to do all these dishes and I have to clean the rest of the house. I was getting ready to get to work, so I wasn't really listening to what she was saying, other than the fact that, that's too bad. And then she kind of said it again, yeah, I know it sucks. I just have to, empty out the dishwasher, and then I got to throw all the other dishes in there. I'm so annoyed because I have to do all these other cleaning things today. So what she's doing is she's hinting at the fact that she wants me to do that, and I should have picked up on that, but I was just not even in my head when she was saying it. I was like, oh yeah, it sucks, babe, as I was getting ready, trying to get out the door. And then eventually it kind of clicked before I left, and I was like, oh, did you want me to quickly unload the dishwasher and put those dishes away before I go? And she's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of what I just said. And I didn't like that she said that. It was like, it's what she just said, as if it was communicated to me in a very blatant way. And, I kind of told her, I was like, hold on. That's not what you said. You were, saying how you were upset that you had to do it, but you didn't tell me to do it. And that was fine. I had to enforce a little boundary there, and she apologized afterwards. But it just goes to show you that from a woman's perspective, it was as if she did say it blatantly. And you have to understand that a lot of time that's how women communicate. And it's not necessarily being, it wasn't like she was really trying to manipulate me. I would have known that's what she was doing if I was paying attention. I just wasn't paying attention. She wouldn't have gotten upset if I didn't do them anyway. But that's just an example of how this may come about in a regular sort of fashion. Anyway, so why am I bringing this up in a topic about sexuality and flirting? Well, the reason is because often when we flirt, it's going to be in that third layer or the first layer, like I said earlier. And depending on the circumstance is going to affect whether or not, which layer you're going to use. If you're at like a work function or you're at a social function with mutual friends, you're probably going to want to use the third layer until you can recognize that she's picking up on it. Examples of the way that would be communicated in the third layer, teasing would be, I guess, an example of a hidden flirting. Eye contact. The way that I usually do with eye contact is where I look. So sometimes I'll, when I'm talking to a girl that I like, as I'm speaking with her, I'll, look at her eyes, look down at her lips as I'm smiling, and then look back up at her eyes. Pausing after she asks me a question. So she says something like, oh, so what do you do for a living? I kind of smile. And then, I answer the question. That little small pregnant pause, as if what she just asked me wasn't about my job, but maybe was actually her liking me and want to continue the conversation, as essentially flirting with me, and recognizing everything, all the little things she's doing as actual flirtatious things. So things like that would be the more subtle way of flirting. I'll get into the more literal way later on with lots of examples, but just for now, that's what it would look like. All right, the fourth layer. Okay, so this one's kind of not really a joke, but It's the fourth layer. When I go over those first three layers, there is a fourth layer. Essentially, what it is just the understanding and comprehension of all the other layers, and it's kind of like being above the third layer. The way this would usually play out is it's kind of like a knowing look. So in the example I use with Katie and her friend Lisa, when Lisa had said that comment about, oh yeah, Katie, I'm really happy for you, with a slight hint of annoyedness, Katie, if she was going to use the fourth layer, would look at her and pause with like a kind of quizzical kind of look, and then maybe smile as if she understood what she just said, and it's not, it didn't fall on deaf ears, and it was, maybe from her point of view, it was a weak thing to do, at her, at this nice positive event, which would make Lisa feel bad for bringing negativity into a positive sort of situation. That would be an example of the fourth layer. So it's mostly a recognition and then a communication of that recognition to the other person. If a woman is being passive-aggressive, if she's being manipulative, sometimes it can be, instead of arguing with her, which doesn't usually work, you just sort of give her a look that kind of says, I know what you're doing, and it's not going to work. And so, to be honest, silence can be a really powerful thing with this one. Just simply looking at her as if you want her to keep, say something. They'll often apologize or admit that what they just did was wrong, or, sometimes they double down, in which case it becomes a bit less the third layer, more the second layer of what they're saying. So, which you can deal with a lot easier. Anyway, that's the fourth layer, the reason why I put it there. Nice picture of Jesus, I guess, or God. It's the all-knowing. All right, statements of intent. These are fun. So I put a picture here of the Rat Pack. Got Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. here. No particular reason I chose a picture of them, outside of the fact that it's actually really hard to find classical examples of guys using statements of intent. Because even in popular culture, you don't really see it that often. In fact, if it was in a movie, it would probably come across like the bad guy would be saying it. The bad guy would be using statements of intent. And it's not to say that they're bad, they're not. It's just that popular culture hasn't really caught up with this. I guess if you watched, 50 Shades of Grey would be a good example of, popular culture now coming to a place where they can talk about these sorts of things. I haven't read the book. I saw the movie 50 Shades of Grey. I don't know if he uses any statements of intent. I don't think he does, but I'm sure he probably does in the book. I'll give you guys examples of what these are so you understand what I'm talking about. But before I do that, I'll just go over a few things. So the reason I chose the Rat Pack, I imagine these are guys that actually would use statements of intent, and I'm actually pretty positive they would when they were going out. Not in their movies or their shows or their specials or anything, but these are the types of guys that kind of say what they mean. And that's what statements of intent are. It's essentially flirting like a man. It's in that first layer, you state, this is why it's called statements, you state your intent. Now your intent is usually that you're attracted to them, that you want them, that you like them, and you state it quite blatantly, not beating around the bush. So that's why I use them as an example, because even in their old films, you kind of get this sense that they're kind of a no-nonsense, especially Frank Sinatra. He's kind of the real reason I use that picture. That's the kind of vibe you want to give off with statements of intent. So the first point I put here is there's a spectrum, low risk to high risk. I'm going to get into that in a second. But essentially there's really low risk statements of intent you can use to everyone that'll never get you in trouble. There's high risk ones that might get you in trouble, and you might want to work your way into, but obviously they have the reward for using those high risk goes up with them as well. They are a powerful way to communicate desire. When you say these to women, you will notice the effect that they have, because it is immediate and it is obvious, the effect that they have. It will take them by surprise when you say it. And this is mostly because, my next point, most guys are too scared to do it. Most women don't have no experience hearing statements of intent. They are one of those things that, like, women talk about it probably with their friends and, in these books and stuff, romance novels where guys can do it, and it's seen as like, oh my God, it's so brazen, so confident. But the problem with statements of intent, especially the medium to high risk ones, is that you need attraction, because if you don't have attraction, they slip very quickly from being super hot to kind of creepy, which you'll see when I show you guys them. So I would definitely stick with the low and medium risk ones initially before you head anywhere near the high risk ones. But even the low risk ones are very, very powerful. And last point, you need to include physical touch. So that was mentioning this in the beginning, this module. There needs to be a physical component to these statements of intent. Statements of intent are verbal escalation. They are verbal ways of making a conversation go more sexual, go more provocative. But it doesn't mean anything unless there's a physical component to go with it, which I'll get into later of exactly how to do that. All right, so here's statements of intent. On the very left side, you got low risk. On the far right, you got high risk. So let's go through some examples of these. So a low risk one would be saying something like, "You're cute, I like you." I'll usually say this after I find something out about her that I like. Doesn't even have to be anything special. Maybe we have something in common, right? We both snowboard, or we both like old movies, or we both like the same kind of music, whatever. I'd acknowledge that by saying, "You're cute, I like you," as if it was something I just realized. Again, it may not seem like much, and I mean it's not, but that sets the tone. When guys that have the problem of running into the friend zone all the time, often it's from a lack of a statement of intent. Women don't know what your intentions are, so they assume friendship, and that's fine. That's what they should assume. So when you're using statements of intent, it's a way to get out of that, and that's the idea behind it. So you're cute, I like you. Another example, you're getting a bit more risk, but still very low risk. When you blank, it's really attractive. So, something like whatever she's doing, when she plays with her hair, when she giggles, when she smiles, when she bites her lip, when she, turns her head sideways and looks at you with the corner of her eyes, whatever she's doing that you like, when you bite your lip, it's really attractive. And you're saying it as if, there has to be this tone with these, where it's not like you're saying it and expecting a response from her. You're saying it because it's true. It's an inner realization, not one that you need her validation for. So you're saying it because it's true and you felt it, or you are seeing it, not because you need her permission to say it. And that may seem obvious, but it's one of the bigger problems guys have when they use statements of intent. They say things like, maybe not so much the low risk ones. You'll see more when I get into the medium to high risk ones, but they say it as if it's a question or as if they need acknowledgement for it. Don't do that. Okay, 2 of them popped up here, but essentially I'll go through both of these. So the next one is, "I'm totally flirting with you." So that would be getting towards medium risk because you're kind of stating what you're doing. So this would be examples of this would be things like when I'm touching her, like maybe I touch her shoulder or I put my arm around her, and often girls will say things like, "Wow, you're really touchy." Like, yeah, I'm totally flirting with you. So that would be an example of a not quite medium yet, but getting towards medium. And again, sets the tone, right? Because if she responds to that positively, it means she's okay with you flirting with her, and she's been, obviously okay with things going forward under that new sort of title of what the new she's going to see everything you do through that lens from now on. So that's good. The next one, "I'm the last guy you should be talking to. I'm bad news." Now, usually this is a medium one. There's a couple of ones that I do that are similar to this one. So another one I do is, "I'm bad news. I'm the last guy who you should be talking to. Don't get alone with me" is sort of, I guess, more of a higher medium risk one. So be like, "Man, I'm the last guy you should be talking to. Just don't get alone with me." Now, the answer to all of these, whether you're saying I'm the last guy you should be talking to, I'm bad news, or don't get alone with me, what she's going to say is why, right? Now, here's the thing. When a girl says why, what she's not asking why because she doesn't know. What you're implying here is quite obvious. When you say to a girl, "Don't get alone with me," or "I'm the last guy you should be talking to," you're implying that because you're bad news, you're a bad guy, you're the guy that's like the bad boy, right? Who's going to make a move, the sexual guy. And so when she asks why, she's not saying why because she wants you to tell her that's what you are. I mean, well, she kind of is in a way, But she's asking why because she's basically saying, I don't believe you have the balls to back up what you just implied. And it's kind of a test. So my response to all of these, which kind of slingshots the statement of intent from a medium right to a high risk, but it doesn't matter because this always works, is so when I say, I'm bad news or I'm the last guy you should be talking to or don't get alone with me, she says, why? I'll say, because I'll fuck the shit out of you. Matter of factly. As if it's like, and I'll smile after I say it. It's like, because I'll fuck the shit out of you. Or I'll say, because if you get alone with me, I'll fuck the shit out of you. As if to say, like, I know why you asked that, and I have no fear in admitting the reason why I said it and stating it. Now, a lot of guys will hear that and they'll think, oh my God, I can't say that to a girl. She's going to, like, slap me. The thing is, you're not actually saying anything offensive, because if you say, well, if you get alone with me, I'll fuck the shit out of you. You're basically saying, you're not saying I'm going to, or I want to, or I will. Well, I guess you're kind of saying you will. You're basically saying I will if you get alone with me. So the idea here is that if you want to have sex with me, I'm the guy that is going to, is essentially what you're communicating. There's nothing wrong with that statement. And sometimes girls will call you on that. After you say it, they'll say, wow, that's a very forward thing to say. And you can just say, I'm just telling the truth. As if you have no problem saying it and you don't care even if she's upset by it, because that's who you are. You're the guy that if a girl, if she wants to go home with you and you go home with her, you're going to have sex. That's who you are. You're the kind of guy that does that. And that should be pretty obvious, the reason why you're saying that. If you can do that, the looks that you'll get from women after saying this, you'll never question it again, believe me. Very, very, very powerful. So use those. All right, so let's keep going though. This is getting more high risk now, so this is something I say sometimes where I'll say, you do not want to be looking at me like that. So I'm smiling when I say this, and you have to say it that way. You don't want to say it in an aggressive way, like you do not want to be looking at me like that. Don't do that. That just sounds creepy. So it's kind of like a flirtatious way of saying it. You do not want to be looking at me like that. And she may ask why again. So this is, in the medium ones, they usually get why, because you're not being completely direct with what you're saying. You're not being completely blatant. You're kind of alluding to the more sexual aspects. But that one's a bit more clear. Next one, whoops. Now we're getting towards the high risk, so these get a little bit more clear, a little bit more obvious. If all these people weren't around right now, I do terrible things with you. I'd probably say to you, not with you. I don't know why I put with you. But yeah, if all these people weren't around right now, I do terrible things to you. And you smile, again. You don't want to say this seriously, like you're a fucking serial killer. The idea here is that by the time you reach these high-risk ones, like don't just throw these out in the middle of a conversation. You will creep girls out. There needs to be a flow to these. So you would want to work your way up. And again, the physical component with these, I'll get into touching in a bit here, but you should be well into touching them in very like flirtatious and almost romantic ways at this point. So don't be saying this when you haven't even touched her yet. It'll come across weird. Okay. So this one, look at what you're doing to me. HOD. HOD is sort of a joke. It stands for hand on dick. I don't usually, I don't usually get girls to put their hand on my dick. It's kind of a joke, but there are situations in which it can work, and this would be one of them. If you get to this point in which things are getting very, very provocative, and you guys are all over each other, and she's giving you an erection. She's turning you on, and you'll know at this point if she's into it or not. So that's when you can say something like this: "Look at what you're doing to me." Take her hand and put it on your dick, and that would be a good thing to do if it's at that point. But again, you wouldn't just throw this out in the middle of a conversation. I hope that goes without saying. But yeah, just again, these are high risk for a reason. And the last one, I want to leave with you. Let's get out of here. So that's when things, essentially escalate outside of wherever you are, whether it be a party or a bar or some sort of event or something. And again, high risk, right? So you don't want to use these unless you know you got a pretty good chance of it working. And you'd know that by if you're using the previous statements of intent and if there's a strong physical component. Like you probably already kissed her. I hope you've kissed her or been, hands all over her and her hands all over you at this point. and that's what would make that one a lot less high risk, even though it still is kind of high risk. All right, so that's statements of intent. Feel free, I have plenty of these, but you guys can make your own as well. But I would recommend using ones in the low to middle range starting today. And if you can work your way up to the high ones, that's great. But that's all right. So touching. Okay, so there's 4 different ways to touch a woman. Friendly, flirty, romantic, and sexual. And they follow that flow in the sense that you start with friendly, you work your way up to flirty, get into romantic, and then sexual. So I'll give examples of all of these. By the way, touching, super important. You make people more comfortable when you touch them, by the way. A lot of guys are scared to touch girls. You need to sort of get over that because you'll never get into a situation where you can actually consistently attract women unless you're willing to touch them. It's pretty much the most important part. I've had very regular boring conversations, or not boring, but certainly boring by the subject matter, on the surface, but been touching them in a way that made it completely more sexual. You can do it with anything. I've also had very sexual conversations with girls with no touching that went nowhere. Even though if you were listening to what I was saying, you'd be thinking, oh, that guy's definitely getting laid. Nope. You need that touch. So what are friendly touches? Shoulder, handshake, arm around. Okay, so arm around is kind of like you put your arm around them. It's more of that's like between friendly and flirty, but certainly you can do it in friendly. Coming up and like, oh, you guys look really cool. I want to come say hi to you guys. Put your arm around them. I'll often do it like if a girl says something that I like, or she's from the same area as me. Like when I'm traveling, I meet another Canadian. I'll put my arm around them and pull them in and be like, good, we got to stick together, us Canadians. Handshake. I mean, that one's pretty obvious. You're not going to do that one more than once, obviously. That's just like introducing yourself to a girl. Shoulder. Shoulder is the big one because you can do it more than once in the friendly category. Start touching friendly right away. But the shoulder should be like your kind of main point of contact. So this is just like a touch on the shoulder. And don't let it linger. So don't touch them and then hold it there. You basically just touch them as if you're making, to emphasize whatever you're saying. And then you drop it. But you can keep doing it. So every time they say something or they make a point that you like, you can touch them again on the shoulder. All right. Flirty. So flirty, the first one, the long touch. This is sort of like anything you do in the first one, in the friendly category, just by letting it go a bit longer and making it a bit more sensual, you can make it more flirty. So what previously was simply a touch on the shoulder, maybe is a touch on the shoulder that comes down her arm and grazes down her arm as you drop it. That's more flirty. Arm around them instead of just a light arm around them, maybe it's rubbing her opposite shoulder and pulling her in a little bit. That's sort of like the long touch. The back waist. The back on the waist replaces the shoulder. So when you're being flirty, instead of touching your shoulder to emphasize points, you just touch her back or her hips. So like the small of her back, essentially. And that's where you start touching to sort of emphasize points. At this point, the body language should be a bit shifted. So she should be like facing you a bit more closer to you if she's being flirtatious back, so that you can use that as an example of make it easier to touch the small of her back. And her hand. This is another one you can use. Squeezing her hand. When she says something like funny or interesting, you have something in common, you're like, oh my god, that's crazy, and you take her hand and you squeeze it as you're saying something. I always make sure I'm talking as I'm doing it. And the other thing that I do with my body language is that I'm not coming in when I touch. I'm usually going away a little bit. I'll see if I can give you an example of that on camera here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But essentially, I'm not sure if this is going to work, but when I'm going to touch a girl's hand, or I'm taking by their hand, I'm squeezing it, I might be like taking her hand and squeezing it and facing the other way like this. Oh my god, that's crazy! As I lean back and squeeze her hand, and then drop it. But notice I'll have like a 45-degree angle. I'll take her hand and squeeze it, and I'll be leaning back as I'm looking her in the eye. What I wouldn't do is take her by the hand and come in like this, like, oh my god, that's crazy, and squeeze her hand, because now you're coming across aggressive, and it's too much. So just keep that in mind. There's a bit of a play there you can do with your body language, where whenever you make a big jump forward in the touching, the rest of your body language can be communicating the opposite a little bit. So you'd face away from them a little bit. Still looking at them, but your shoulders would be facing away. Um, oh, sorry. Some guys are talking about hand on dick that I'm just seeing here. Good. We'll get into the comments here later, but I'll jump back into the presentation. All right, romantic. The face is a big one, obviously, with romantic. Telling a girl how beautiful her eyes are, how she has you have really great skin, great lips, things like that. As you touch her face and get in close, that would be romantic. A kiss, obviously, is romantic. Now, when I say kiss, I don't mean a makeout. A makeout is something that happens in sexual, but essentially it's a kiss that leaves her wanting more. It's not really a peck either. It's just a passionate kiss, I guess, would be romantic. And embrace. Embrace is sort of like replaces the shoulder and the back waist in the sense that it's kind of like you're standing next to each other and your hands are on her hips and her hands are kind of on your, I guess, shoulder or back or something, where you're kind of like, it's almost like if you picture people slow dancing. You're kind of doing one of those where you're kind of connected at the hip. You're not dancing, though. You're just sort of connected at the hip and speaking like face-to-face, very close. And it's very romantic at that point. There's other ones, too. If she's, sitting on your lap, or your hand is on her thigh, or her hand is on your thigh, if you're sitting down with your arm around her, that would be romantic. All those things are romantic. Whoop. And sexual. Makeout, which I already mentioned. Makeouts can be tough. I mean, they're not tough, but I don't know. Sometimes it's worth doing, sometimes it's not. If you just met a girl and you don't know her that well, but it's really on, you start making out with her, and you can't leave the place with her, you're probably never going to see her again. Even if you got her number, it probably wouldn't. They're not that consistent in the sense of them, staying in touch, because they usually get buyer's remorse because they don't really know you. They probably were drunk. Her friends will tell her how she just made out with some dude when she was drunk. Not really solid game, but it can be solid game if you make a point of getting to know her really well and you guys have a good connection. Makeouts can be fun. Sexual touch in public places, like in bars or in parties and events and things. Mostly what you're going to get away with is things like covert butt grabs. That's essentially like the main one, and those are fine because you can do them discreetly. So if her back's against the bar or something, you come in close, whisper something in her ear, and you slide your hand down and grab her butt. Things like that. Again, you're already at sexual. These things follow a flow, so you would be past the point where she would probably be okay with that. That's pretty much it. Don't really go for boob grabs in public places. That's something you really only want to do when you're basically about to have sex. Unless the only time that would not be, or that would be okay, would be as if she's like bragging about her tits or something. Is she's saying how, oh yeah, they're natural. In which case I might just grab them and be like, oh yeah, they're pretty natural. But other than that, though, you don't want to just like feel her up in the bar. That's not a good game. And then of course HOD makes its appearance again, hand on dick. I already mentioned that if it is a situation in which you can get away with it and it seems like she'd be into it, I mean, by all means, go for it. I'm not really a hand-on dick guy. I know other instructors are like crazy into the hand-on dick, but it certainly works if the circumstances are right. But again, the problem I have with hand-on dick is that teaching it is risky because there's some guys out there that are like, man, I don't want anyone being like, oh, Derek Cajun taught me to take girls' hands and put them on my dick, and that is a great way to make them attracted to me, because that's not what I'm saying. Anyway, I think you guys are all smart enough to understand the subtlety of how that works. But just in case, I'm not advocating what I just said, other than unless it calls for it, in which case it should be obvious. Good. Okay, so that's touch. Now, thing with touching, start doing this with everyone. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Don't do all of this with everyone. Start doing friendly touch with everyone. So I don't care if it's your grandmother or other dudes or whatever. I mean, there's certain, even with friendly, like arm around, you don't necessarily want to do that with other dudes unless you're already friends with them, because they can see that as a kind of a dickish thing to do. But certainly just like touching people in a friendly way, because the thing is, if you touch a girl and you haven't done it a lot and it's not part of the way that you normally converse, they're going to sense that, and it's going to come across robotic, and they're going to get a bit, like, I said earlier, women can sense your emotion. They're going to sense that, and they're going to call you out on it. They'll usually say like, oh, you're pretty touchy, in like a weird way, as if like what you just did was weird. Because that's the vibe they're going to get from it. Because they're going to pick up on the fact that you think it might be weird. So you have to get over that by just doing it to everybody. And to be honest, like when guys watch me in set and stuff now, I'm not even conscious about touching, really. I do it subconsciously. My hands just move, and they're always touching a girl, and I'm used to doing it that way because I'm always doing demos and things so guys can see what I'm doing, and I overdo it. My hands are all over women when I talk to them. Not like in a creepy way. It's just that they move from one place to another, and it's all very natural. Even if you watched it, you'd be like, oh, wow, seems like they're having a kind of a flirty conversation. But by no means am I taking my time with it, And with this, friendly, flirty, romantic, sexual, that can happen in the course of 30 seconds. I've done it, Like sometimes when if you've ever been out with instructors, we'll go up to a girl sometimes and start talking to her, and things can escalate very quickly to makeouts within 30 seconds. Sometimes that is just with flash game where you get eyes from a girl and you can sense you can make out with her and you go and do it. But other times it's that you just do a quick sort of, you do all these things very quickly. So you touch her and you say, wow, you're really cute. I didn't, what's your name? Bring her in, touch her, grab her hand. As she comes in, she puts her hand on your waist. You pull her in by the waist and you take her, take the hair out of her eyes and say, wow, you have really pretty eyes. And, take her hand, this is another one. Run her hair up through the back of her head and kind of squeeze it a little bit, and you pull a little bit. It's an erogenous zone, the back of her neck, where her hairline starts, and you just pull a little bit. Don't like pull her hair, but just put a little pressure on, and she'll get goosebumps, and then it can turn into a makeout. Now you can do all that in 30 seconds, or you can take half an hour or longer doing all these things and really, playing it slow. But often there needs to be that flow for it to be a solid game. Is sort of the idea. So keep that in mind. All right. Eye contact. I just threw a picture up here of James Dean. I thought that was, James Dean is a good example of a dude that had a lot of charisma and a lot of sort of masculine kind of, or actually not even masculine, it's more like boyishness about him. But he had this really good, he had mastered his eyes, I think. There's not much. He was only in 3 movies, really, and there's not really even that many photographs of him. But you can get a sense of it when you watch his movies, that he knew how to make himself look good using his eyes and how to communicate with his eyes. You get that more out of him than other actors in his time. So smile with your eyes. Perfect example here, James Dean doing that. If you notice him, you take away his eyes, it doesn't really look like he's smiling, but you look at his eyes and it looks like he's smiling. Right? So that's what you call smiling with your eyes. They teach it to models and stuff, walking the runway. But you learn how to do that. It's not to say that you should be straight facing a girl, but if you can communicate that with your eyes, that can be very, very powerful. Often when I'm out doing demos, I can get warm opens all the time just by looking at girls and smiling with my eyes and then have them smile with their eyes back. It's sort of using that third layer. Again, it's communicating to them that I communicate on their level and in the same way they do. So if a girl is on the bar and she notices a guy giving a look like James Dean is looking here, that's super attractive. In fact, when you ask girls, women, how do you flirt with a guy, they'll often say, well, I just look at him. And it's when a guy is able to look back like that it can create a very easy open. Look until she looks away. This is another problem guys have. They look at girls they're attracted to, and then the girls look at them, and then they quickly look away, like the guys do, as if And I know that when I was younger, I'd kind of write that off, being like, yeah, I showed her I'm not a dude that just stares at her like every other guy. I'm better than that. I'm a dude that has, I'm high value or whatever. But it's bullshit. It's just fear. Excuse me. So look at a girl, look at a woman. When she notices you looking at her and she looks at you, or if you notice her looking at you, look at her until she looks away. And then if she holds eye contact for a couple seconds, and a couple seconds can be a long time to look at someone in the eyes, walk over to her. And I mean, at that point, you can say whatever. I usually open with something very direct, so I'd usually say something like, "You can't look at me like that and not say anything. What's your name?" And man, that'll work awesome. But if you're not in a bar, if you're just at a party or even out on the streets, when you're walking down the street and you see a girl, look at her. She may make eye contact with you and look back at her and kind of smile. Have a little smirk on your face. And if she smiles back, you can stop. You can just say, "Hey, I don't really know what I'm, I've actually said this before. I've just said, "Hey, I don't really have anything to say. I just thought you were really cute and you have a really nice smile. What's your name?" That's it. And that has turned into numbers and dates and relationships many, many times for me and many others. It's kind of the way that women expect to be picked up, to be honest. At least it's probably how they would talk about it in their fantasies of how it happens. So start doing that. And you'll be surprised at the kind of looks you'll get from women when you can master this. Learn how to communicate emotions with your eyes. Now, this is really hard to do. I said smile with your eyes, which is one thing, but learning how to communicate other emotions with your eyes, that gets pretty difficult. I'm pretty good at it because I took acting and studied it, and I think I have a pretty expressive set of eyes, which obviously helps, but it may be something you want to look at acting lessons. Theater acting tends to... theater acting is more over the top, so it'll definitely get you an idea of how to communicate with your eyes by overdoing it. But the more subtle way is the way you want to learn, which would be more like film acting, I guess. But it may be something you guys want to look into if you want to get better at it, because it is something that you don't absolutely need it. There's a lot of guys that have, they're not so great with their eyes. But I just know for me personally, I get so much attraction from girls using my eyes. It's usually one of the first things they'll say. You have really pretty eyes, or that sort of stuff. Which again, I stole it from James Dean mostly, and Brando as well. So you can look to them for inspiration as well. It's good stuff. All right, so that's it for the lesson. I got some homework for you guys. First piece of homework: try a statement of intent and notice the reaction. So if you didn't write any of those down, go back. Try the low risk ones and the medium risk ones. I'm not going to say it's your homework to try a high risk one. Although if you use the low risk and medium risk ones and they go well, then you can certainly try it. But I really want you guys to use a low and medium risk one. And I'd like you guys to put your experience of what happens after you do it on the Facebook group. So talk about the expression that she gave, how she reacted, what she said. And I'd like you guys to share that with the rest of the class if you can. Number 2, start making and holding eye contact with women everywhere. So on the streets, at work, well, maybe not at work if you don't want to create too much drama or dip your pen in the company kind of thing. But you can certainly practice it a little bit without coming across weird. So do it on the street, do it in bars, do it at parties, do it wherever you are, grocery store, wherever. See if you can get a girl to smile just by holding eye contact with her. That should be your homework, your goal. And number 3, practice touching. Make it a normal way for you to communicate. So this is something you got to start doing because like I said earlier, the only way to make it a part of your normal way of speaking is to do it all the time. And so that's what you want to do. All right, so I'm going to go to the Facebook group here, the YouTube chat here. If you guys have any questions, now would be the time. I'm just going to read back because I didn't see all these other ones that you guys had during the course of the presentation here. Let me just bring it on me. All right, so I'll open the floor up. So this is like some Kardashian stuff. I assume he's mentioning that about the layered stuff. Yeah, it is. But I mean, Kardashians, at least most of them, are women, just like the rest of them. So they're going to do the same stuff. So does layer 3 build upon layer 1? I'm not sure what you mean by build upon. It's not the sense that it builds in the sense that it's just different. So you could be saying something on the first layer but communicating something else entirely on the third layer. And that's kind of what the idea of it was. So I guess in that way it builds, but the two won't necessarily be related or connected. Witness layer 2 yesterday at the gym. In the way my instructor flirted with the girl. It was so obvious. Yeah, so obvious flirting. Again, if You can be obvious by using the first layer when you flirt, by stating it, like I use the statements of intent, but you don't want to be subtly obvious. That's bad. Or you can be very, very subtle using the third layer, like I said, where you sort of use eye contact to do it. What you don't want to do is say something in an obviously flirty way where it becomes not discreet at all, but also you're not stating it directly. So it's kind of like the worst of both worlds, like I mentioned. Lions LOL. I'm assuming they're...
You're going to tell them about our Christmas present?
I was going to say that for you to tell them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys about the Christmas present.
I wasn't sure if we were saying that.
In a few minutes.
I wasn't sure if we were saying that for this one, but I guess since this is the last class before Christmas, it would make sense to tell it on this one.
Yeah.
And Alan Lyons says, the risk with that one is that you can get arrested with hand on dick. Yeah. Can you start with the low risk and work your way up to high in the same conversation? Yes. In fact, that's what I was getting at. Again, that's why I would never, when I talk about hand on dick, it's really only used in a situation in which it's obvious that that is an okay thing to do. So it should already be that you guys are all over each other. You never want to just open with hand on dick or jump into it in a way that is, yeah. So I hope that's clear at this point. Look, yes, I've done that one. Look what you've done. She told me to whip it out. Yeah, it happens. Girls like dicks. It should be no surprise. What was it that your friend who is an instructor asked you to try? Oh yeah, so that was Venture. He had this thing, so I'll tell you the story, it's kind of cool. He had this thing where he told me a story about how he got a blowjob from a girl in a New York bar, and she was there with her boyfriend. And I kind of asked him how he did it, and he said something, I believe something like, when he started talking to her, he just said, oh, so are you single or what? And she said, no, I'm here with my boyfriend. And he just went really sexual right away for some reason, just because he was just bored. This is what Andy does. He's just bored, so he just wanted to go sexual for just his own entertainment. So he said, oh, cool, do you guys ever do some really fun stuff? And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you ever give like him a blowjob in public? And she was like, oh my God, what? And he's like, yeah, what? And he just made it seem like it was totally normal for him to talk about that. And he kind of knew it was super high risk to do that. But anyway, she kind of got flustered and like walked away. I was like, I can't even talk to you. But then she came back afterwards. And anyway, long story short, she was intrigued by the fact that he even said that he was like held his ground so confidently about it. And he eventually ended up getting a blowjob from her in the fire escape and he got caught actually, not by the boyfriend, by the staff. So, but he basically said that, yeah, you should, because when he told me that story, I was like, how can you talk about that stuff, like getting a blowjob in public from a girl, like so blatantly? And he's like, oh, just do it, just try it. And I was like, fuck, okay. So I did, and then it worked. I didn't get a blowjob, but I got a good reaction. And so, again, don't recommend doing that necessarily the way that, because this is high-level shit at this point, but it just goes to show you that what you think you can get away with and what you can actually get away with are usually two very different things. So anyway, Alan says, hey, Chris. Chris is here now, yeah?
Yep.
Cajun, after going out on your first or second dates, should you show less interest than the woman? If she expresses interest, like, I really like you, how would you respond? I mean, that's really contextual.
You always want to make her feel good. Don't deliberately show less interest than her.
Yeah.
That's the wrong way to look at it. What you want to do is you always want to make her feel good for doing anything that you want more of. So if you want to make her feel good for showing interest in you, you want to make her feel good for liking you. If she says she really likes you, make her feel good for that. You don't have to say I like you back. You don't have to say I like you more. But if you don't respond to it, if you leave it blank, that's going to make her feel rejected, make her feel not desired. It's gonna really, really hurt things.
Yeah. You're
So don't take that attitude of trying to show less than her. You just always want to see confident, and you never want to give off any neediness, like you need her, like you like her too much. But that doesn't mean you can't like her a lot if you do it in a non-needy way.
Yeah. If a girl on a second date said, I really like you, I would take it as a big compliment.
Yeah.
And I would just like, really? That's awesome. I really like you too. I totally want to get to know you more too. I already, on a second date, know that you're incredibly sexy and you're really funny. And that's like the two things I look for. So it's perfect. Something like that. So I'm not really saying like, oh my God, I really like you too, we should get in a relationship. Because often that's what they tend to be doing. They're trying to sort of guide it into that if that's what they're looking to do. So I usually take that and take it as a compliment and then shift it into what I want, which is essentially telling them, yeah, we both really like each other. Let's get to know each other better.
All right, so guys, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Christmas present because I think you're really going to like that. So what we've decided to do is we're going to give you guys everybody who is attending this webinar, but also everybody who signed up for Christmas Decoded, we're going to give all of you guys access to the Love Systems Lounge. And so this is our private message board that has an archive going back years and years and years. And so you guys, we're gonna be merging all of that in with this. With our discussion group and stuff like that. So now you guys are gonna have a permanent location, permanent account to this this private Love Systems message board that goes back for years and years and years, and it's actually sort of the descendant of Mysteries Lounge from the book The Game. So everybody's going to get access to that, and it's a really good community, and it'll be really great to have 40, 50 new guys on the lounge. It'll be excellent.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get you guys your own little private section of it too. Not private, but a section for Charisma Decoded. That way you guys can post topics and stuff that relate to this course, homework and whatnot in there as well. And at least know that the people that are going there are interested in Charisma Decoded or attendees as well.
Yeah. So there's going to be we're going to post links in the Facebook group and the Teachable classroom in a couple of hours, and we'll send it all out to you on email as well when perhaps tomorrow.
Cool. So yeah, Merry Christmas, you guys.
Merry Christmas. Ho,
yeah.
ho, ho, ho.
And that's I don't know if Chris mentioned it, but that's access for life essentially. And it's absolutely free for you guys, so it's good. Just to get back to the questions, Andrew Breton wants to give more details on body language when you're delivering a statement of intent. I mean, it really depends on the statement of intent, but whereabouts they are in the risk spectrum would change your body language. So, but often if I'm saying something that's ballsier, it's kind of like looking at her with a knowing look that kind of says, I get it. Like, I'm flirting with you, and I know that what I just said is ballsy, but that's okay because I know you like it. So kind of just sort of like a knowing look is usually what I do for them. That works really well. How can you tell if a woman is smiling at you with her eyes? If she's staring at you for more than a few seconds, assume that she's smiling at you with her eyes. Because there's no other reason why a girl would keep looking at a guy unless that she liked him or you got dog shit in your face or something. So it's usually assume attraction. Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas. Yeah. All right. Any other questions you guys have about today's module before we finish off here? So again, just to reiterate, we have a different, for those of you that didn't look at the schedule, the next module is on this Tuesday after Christmas. And it is on the Power of Pursuit, which is taught by me. So if you guys are expecting Chris will be doing the last one. I'm doing this next one. That will be on Tuesday instead of the regular Monday, just for the holidays, so keep that in mind. What are some examples of layer 3 communication with a girl? Rit, I just answered that in the slides. I thought I'd give you guys a bunch of answers to that. Yes.
Pay attention. We're not answering that question.
The examples of layer 3 communication with a girl, I guess I gave more examples of girls doing it. So yeah, more examples of guys doing it. The thing is, guys don't usually do it. We don't really do it, the third layer, because it's seen as, like, if I was passive aggressive or was trying to be hinting at something with my guy friends, they'd get really pissed off at me. Because that's like a really weak way of communicating. So as guys, we don't really do it too much. And we don't like it. That's why we get upset, when we have fights with women. It's often from that in relationships. It's them saying something in that third layer, us not picking up on it, and getting frustrated when they expect us to. But in terms of communicating the way that you would do it in a positive way, it would be with things like teasing, like the eye contact. So smiling with your eyes, looking at her when you say things, doing the staring down at her lips and then back at her eyes as you're talking. It's just sort of like subtle flirtatious things that don't really necessarily have a verbal component to them. That's essentially what it is. I mostly use it as an example of how women flirt with guys, because women are never really obvious when they're flirting with guys. They're not going to be super obvious. So if you're waiting for that, that doesn't really happen. They're going to be more subtle, and it's about maybe being able to pick up on that. Cool. All right, guys. Great module. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. And please go to the Facebook group, work on your homework, and keep it up. And we'll be giving you the access to the lounge shortly. I'm not sure what our time.
Yeah, you're going to get a link, and that link is going to have a form that you have to fill out. And then when you fill out the form, you're going to get an email back with your lounge account. We have to create that account for you.
And one of the guys asked earlier, is it 3 months they're going to have access to the videos, replays?
Yeah, we're gonna give everybody access for an additional 3 months after the end of this program. So enough time to watch it over several times. Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. Thanks for attending, and I will see you guys on Tuesday. And Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. All right.